Hello and welcome. This is Mr. Thompson, Assistant Principal here at Egan High School, and today we are going to talk about the Rights and Responsibilities Student Handbook. Our focus today is to look at behaviors that can lead to expulsion on the first offense, or behaviors that could lead to different levels of suspension on the very first offense. Be aware, we have sent this home to students, and there are parts of the student handbook that students should be responsible for and be aware of, despite the fact that we won't cover all of those today. This is also posted on the District 196 website, and so students, you are responsible for understanding all of the student rules here at Egan High School. In this video, we are going to focus, at least at first, on the offenses that students can be expelled for the very first time they commit these behaviors. So first of all, we'll talk briefly about drug use in terms of selling or sharing even with another student. Along with that is included is drug paraphernalia. If a student shares their drugs, sells their drugs, or sells or shares drug paraphernalia, they will be expelled the very first offense. Students should be aware that they will be expelled if they ever bring a weapon to school. Included in that is students that bring look-alike weapons to school. Students should know that any student that makes threats to the building, both through like bombs or shooting threats, will be expelled on the very first offense. Students should know that any acts of arson, which is basically an intentional act to set fire to the school, would also cause an immediate expulsion from Egan High School. And finally, any sort of aggravated assault on any student or staff member at the school, which is basically assault with the use of a weapon, would be an immediate expulsion at school. Normally, an assault on a student is a 5-day suspension, but also know that an assault to a staff member would also be an immediate expulsion. So that wouldn't include necessarily a weapon, but students would be expelled if they assaulted a staff member. Next, we'll move on to suspensions that include 5 and 3-day suspensions. First up, we will talk about drug and alcohol possession. Any students in possession of drugs or alcohol would be suspended for 5 days. Along with that, any students that are under the influence of drugs or alcohol while on school grounds, that includes off-campus sites and school activities, such as state tournaments and hockey games off campus, all those kinds of things would be included. Students would also be suspended for 5 days. Along with that, there is a drug and alcohol chem evaluation. If students choose not to do that, the suspension would actually move to 10 days. So obviously no drugs or alcohol in possession, but also no students should be under the influence of drugs or alcohol while at school. Next up, students that engage in fighting at our school will be suspended 3 days. That's when both students choose to be combative with each other and choose to get into a fight. They would both be suspended, like I said, for 3 days. Now, the differentiation with assault is if one student has done everything they can to avoid the fight and the other student still comes and attacks them, that student would be charged with assault, and that's a 5-day suspension. In both cases, both fighting and assault, Egan administration often elects to bring the Egan police in and have them write out tickets for the students that engage in that kind of behavior. Okay, next up we'll move on to suspensions that vary depending on the severity of what has happened or what was done. So the first one we'll talk about is vandalism. Vandalism can be everything from a 1-day suspension to a 5-day suspension. In most cases, it requires also restitution, which means you have to pay back any damages caused as a result of that vandalism. Next up, we'll talk about theft. That has all different levels of consequences related to it depending on how severe it was and how it was conducted. So for instance, robbery includes a weapon or through force, money or property is stolen. That would lead to expulsion. Along with that is burglary, breaking into the building at like an off hours. That can lead to expulsion right away, all the way down to a 1-day suspension for minor things that might be stolen. And it really depends on the cost of the items that are stolen. So theft has a wide range of consequences. They are outlined in the student handbook with real specific price values, so students know exactly what the suspension entails based on how severe the theft was, along with that, how the theft took place. Okay, thanks for hanging in with me. We're going to wrap up with the suspensions that generally are 1 day on the first offense. They often can increase to a higher level if they continue to happen, but we'll go briefly down this entire list of 1 day initial suspensions. That includes things like verbal abuse or harassment upon the first offense, can lead to a 1 day suspension. Tobacco or vape use, along with that, lighters in their possession, that can lead to a 1 day suspension. Typically, that also involves a ticket from the Eagan Police. Nuisance devices, that typically is cell phones, and it's usually based off of warnings first, but then students, if they continue to use those inappropriately, that can lead to a 1 day suspension. Falsifying signatures or failure to give your name to an adult upon request, please know that can lead to a 1 day suspension. If you instigate a fight, and that can be through electronic communication, even electronic communication off campus, students can create an atmosphere where a fight happens. Students that started that fight or instigated a fight could be suspended up to 1 day. Videotaping a fight and posting it on the internet will often lead to a 1 day suspension. Trespassing on campus, typically it's in after hours type of time. Students are in inappropriate places, that can lead possibly to a 1 day suspension. Insubordination, which is just when students refuse to follow through with a request of an adult in the building. As long as it's a lawful request, we expect students to follow through with that. Typically, our students do a great job of that, but please know it can lead to a 1 day suspension. Okay, we want to talk about some final rules and reminders that really result mostly in detentions for students that do not follow through. Let's just go through this list quickly. One is just to automatically be to class on time. Set that expectation that you'll be there by the time the bell rings. You will be in class. We have a 1-minute warning bell. Be prepared to be moving and get to your class on time. Make sure you're moving when you hear that warning bell. This also includes pause and study hall. Sometimes students do not believe it's as important to get to those classes. We still have consequences and detentions for students that do not follow through on getting to those classes and those periods on time. Students that have unexcused absences, you will serve a detention. So be aware if a parent or guardian does not clear your absence or have a staff member clear an absence, there is likely some follow-up with a detention after that. Reminder, school is not an open campus during lunch. There is no time that students should be leaving the building without permission. That does include lunch. Do not order food into the school. As a result of that, we will just throw the food away. So do not order food to the main office or to any of the doors in the building. We will plan on just getting rid of it at that point. So do not order food to the school. Do not take food out of the lunchroom. Just a quick reminder, plan on, if you come into the lunchroom, to order your food and get your food there and eat it in the lunchroom. We do not take food throughout the school. So a couple other reminders, students with parking passes, you should only be parking in the east or stadium lots. You should not be parking in the staff lot. If you receive a ticket, you will also not be eligible for a pass the following trimester. So you must have a parking pass and only stay in the east or stadium lots. After school, students should be reminded they should be in a supervised activity, or you can head down to the east entrance and be picked up down there. Remember to behave appropriately, as you should be in supervised areas. This is a responsibility of yours to basically stay on task. You're supposed to be doing. We do not want to take away that option for students to stay after school. Reminder, do not go to the middle school. That's partly why we don't want students to be picked up on the upper lot after school, is to kind of stay away from the middle school after school. We do not have students in that building at any time. They do not want students from the high school entering their middle school unless they have permission to do so. And finally, any areas of concern that you have regarding rules and behavior, or just some concerns you'd like to make us aware of, we have a website, Eagan High School website, that has a thing called reportit.com. You can report behavior or other things you're concerned about, and you can remain anonymous. So feel free to use that at any time. Students and staff, thank you for giving us the time today to go over these. We, by law, have to cover all of these possible expulsion and suspension cases, so students are aware of them. We just want you to know your rights. The last thing I just want to just touch on is understand if there is a search, be aware administrators will conduct the search. That needs to be based on reasonable suspicion. So if there's reasonable suspicion, students may be requested to have a search. Please know that is expected that students comply with those searches. Have a great day, Egan. I hope if you have questions, you feel free to stop on down with the main office and visit with one of the administrators. Or if you just have a basic question, feel free to visit and talk with your PAWS teachers. Again, remember, you're responsible for the entire student handbook and should know all the rules. We just wanted to touch on the main ones that could lead to expulsion and some of the suspension cases here at school. Thanks, and have a great day.